The land laid waste, mourning over the land, the day of the Lord, a call to repentance, the land refreshed and restored, God's Spirit poured out, God defends and blesses His people, and Jesus completes 7 letters to 7 churches. Today on 3 in 1, as we consider Joel chapters 1 through 3 and Revelation chapter 3. We don't know a whole lot about the man, Joel, other than what it tells us in the very first verse of the book that bears his name. The word of the Lord that came to Joel, the son of Pethuel. That's not a whole lot. That's not much about the man. We know more about his ministry and his message. And that's just fine. Although sometimes it's helpful to know a bit more of the background on the messenger, his ministry and his message are the most important. So, what was his ministry? Well, he was a prophet. He was to speak forth the word of the Lord. And he was to speak forth that word to a specific people at a specific time. Now, what's the fixed point of reference in Israel's history that we're attempting to relate each major prophet and minor prophet to? It relates around the 70-year captivity. So, when was Joel written? Was he written before, during, or after this 70-year captivity? It was written before. But how long before? We don't know. Because Joel doesn't give us any kings or prophets to give us another fixed point of reference. So we have a man with a ministry and a message. And this man's ministry was to deliver the message, a timely message, a word from the Lord right after a devastating destruction, attempting to use the physical destruction as a segue to a spiritual warning, saying, "Hear this, you elders, and give ear, all you inhabitants of the land. Has anything like this happened in your days, or even in the days of your fathers? Tell your children about it. Let your children tell their children, and their children another generation. What the chewing locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust left, the crawling locust has eaten. And what the crawling locust left, the consuming locust has eaten." Now, we're a bit removed from the emotion that would follow a devastating loss like this. We have really no way of relating to just how much destruction a swarm of locusts can do, what kind of havoc this would reap upon an agrarian society. But those who lived in our region, in central Minnesota in 1877, sure did. In fact, the swarms of locusts were so severe that Minnesota's governor proclaimed April 26th, 1877 as a day of prayer against the locusts. There's actually a few commemorative chapels that were built in this region pointing back to that very day of prayer. And just imagine your whole store of food, your family, your livelihood gone, chewed away by a bunch of little bugs, by a plague of unstoppable foes. Now, we may not have experienced this sort of physical tragedy, but we've definitely endured other sorts of tragedies, and there's always a bit of heightened spiritual awareness that immediately, although briefly, follows devastating destruction like this. And so God sends the prophet Joel, a man whose ministry was to deliver a message that would capitalize upon this brief, heightened spiritual awareness. In our country, for a few Sundays after 9/11, churches saw a surge in attendance, but it was brief. And God wants to see a real, long-lasting surge, a long-lasting fruit. And in order to do this, the physical tragedy has to shake loose the false foundations in a person's heart. And so the message is, be broken before your God and humbly seek Him with your whole heart, Listen to verses 13 and 14. "Gird yourselves and lament, you priests. Wail, you who minister before the altar. Come, lie all night in sackcloth, you who minister to my God. For the grain offering and the drink offering are withheld from the house of your God. Consecrate a fast. Call a sacred assembly. Gather the elders and all the inhabitants of the land into the house of the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord." Now, notice, God didn't fix their physical problem at first. Why? Well, if the physical problem can help you spiritually, if it can shake loose the false foundation that they were standing upon, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? I mean, in the book of Hebrews, God says, "Once more, I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens." And the words "once more" indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. I mean, that's an interesting concept, isn't it? To shake what could be shaken so that what cannot be shaken can remain. It gives us a little bit more insight in how to handle the physical problems of unbelievers. I mean, is it always right to intervene and solve the problem right away for someone who is being shaken? Or is it possible that God is shaking what can be shaken so that what cannot be shaken may remain? In the very next verse in the book of Hebrews says, "Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire." And all of that could be a sufficient summary of the entirety of the book of Joel. Oftentimes, God allows physical suffering, earthly difficulties, to burn away, to shake away the perishable, and to refine the eternal in our lives, so that the unshakable may remain. Now, what if the plague of locusts, or whatever form it takes in your life, was something that had been filtered through the loving hand of a sovereign God? Like in the case of Job. Remember, God was the one that offered up Job. He's the one that said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" It was filtered through the sovereign hand of a good God. Well, in that case, God makes a precious promise to us. And in our reading today, it was found in chapter 2, verse 25, where God said, "So I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the crawling locust, the consuming locust, the chewing locust, my great army which I sent among you. You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, who has dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never be put to shame." See, after all that Job went through, at the end of his account, it said this, "Now the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning." And you know what? For every believer in Jesus Christ, that can be placed at the end of our account as well. It may just not be realized on this side of glory. But certainly, if the locusts have passed through and chewed up everything in your life, even if that's happened, Jesus still remains, and he's just about done with that place that he's preparing for you. That is, if you have made a decision to surrender to Jesus Christ. And let that be a warning to those of you who have not yet yielded to Jesus, surrendered to Jesus. And the book of Joel ends with a similar sobering warning. Listen to verses 14 through 16 of Joel chapter 3. "Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. The sun and moon will grow dark, and the stars will diminish in their brightness. The Lord also will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. The heavens and the earth will shake, but the Lord will be a shelter for his people and the strength of the children of Israel." Well, we've given a good amount of time to our reading in the Old Testament today, since the book itself was only 3 chapters. So we read the entirety of that little letter that God wrote to his people through the prophet Joel. Now, in our New Testament reading, we read a few little letters as well, even smaller than the book of Joel. But this time, the author was Jesus himself. Jesus, writing 7 letters to 7 churches to commend them, to command them, to encourage them, and to exhort them. And today, we read the last 3 little letters to Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. Now, it's those last 2 cities that are interesting. I mean, Jesus doesn't have anything bad to say about the church in Philadelphia. And Jesus doesn't have anything good to say about the church in Laodicea. And you've probably noticed by now that even though these were written to actual churches back in John's day, they contain components that are not only common to churches in our day, but also to us as individuals. So everyone And every church wants to be the church in Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. No one really wants to be the lukewarm from Laodicea, the nauseating aspects of apathy towards the things that are eternally important. Now, both of these cities, both of these churches existed at the same time. So it was the best of times and the worst of times. And you've probably heard that quote before from a book called A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. But I looked up the full quote from the first paragraph today. Listen, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. And then he writes, in short, the period was so far like the present period. And so he was saying this tale could take place here and now. Just like we said before, two cities, Philadelphia and Laodicea, two churches, Philadelphia and Laodicea. And it could be two individuals, Philadelphia and Laodicea, the best of times, the worst of times, one wise, one foolish, one full of faith, one full of unbelief, one walking in the light, one walking in darkness, one in the spring of hope, one in the winter of despair, one with everything, one with nothing, one on their way to heaven, and one, well, the other way. And the interesting part of all of this is that if Philadelphia and Laodicea were to make their own self-assessment, they probably would have made the wrong one. Philadelphia would have probably been too hard upon themselves, and Laodicea would have been a little bit too light. The church in Philadelphia probably despaired that they were the worst, the foolish, the faithless. They were the nothings of all the seven churches that Jesus wrote to. And as we read today, Laodicea definitely thought that they were the best, the wisest, the most faithful church with everything a church would have to be, that church would have to be categorized as successful. And yet we read that they both couldn't be more wrong. And so it's important. It's important to see yourself as God sees you, not as others see you, not even as you see you, and for some of you, especially not as you see you. You know, I was asked a question at our last men's meeting, and the question was, Pastor, what's your assessment of us as men in this fellowship? What do you think that we're doing wrong? What could we be doing better in your opinion? And I answered, well, my assessment really doesn't matter. It's kind of like what Paul the Apostle said. Look, I don't even judge myself, guys. I leave that up to the Lord. And so although my assessment as your pastor really doesn't matter, God's does. And I know if you ask God to give you his assessment of your current condition, he will answer you. Just be open to his assessment. Be open to his encouragement to you, and also be open to his exhortation to you, even to his rebuke towards you, because he rebukes those that he loves, and he longs to see you fruitful in the time that remains as he's preparing a place for you, because soon and very soon he is coming to pick up his purchased possession. And you want to be able to stand before him and say, yes, Jesus, thank you. I am unashamed because of what you have done in my life. And so as you ask for his assessment, be open to not only his word of encouragement or exhortation, but also be open to receiving the fullness of his Spirit so that you can walk in those good works that he's prepared in advance for you, so that you can run the race that he has marked out for you.